So why don't we start? We've got a quorum, and everybody's here with the exception of Maggie and Mickey. So I guess the first order of business is the minutes. Jesse sent those out this morning again for everybody to look at. If anybody have any comments or subtractions, additions, or
they look great.
Revisions?
I move to accept the minutes.
I second.
Okay. Victor?
Seconded. Frank?
Right, second.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes approved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All in favor? Aye, okay. We have no one from the public here, it looks like. So I guess, Maggie, you on? Maggie, you on?
Still got that damn Villagra, excuse me. Well, that's,
Okay.
I show him as a participant. There's two victors.
Yeah, I do too. One
Yeah,
Victor,
we do. But
Yeah, I
there's
do too.
no,
one that doesn't.
she doesn't though.
She may have to close out of Victor's. And then open her own.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I've never seen that one.
I haven't either.
Well, also it doesn't have a speaker at all by her name in the panelist.
Right,
It's
there's
got
nothing
the-
there.
Right?
But you don't have to have the speaker there as long as your own computer's on if you join by
Yeah,
audio on your
that's true.
computer.
That's true.
Moving right along.
Anyway. Do you have her phone number, Zell? Just give it to me and I'll try.
Hold
to
on, so I'm gonna make her a co-host to see what happens. This may crash everything, but we'll try it. Maggie? Can you hear me yet?
No,
Do we still have you, Victor?
I beg your pardon.
Oh, good. We still have you. Okay, good.
Mhm.
Victor Villagra is connecting to audio.
Ah, that's good.
Can you hear us?
Connected. There she is.
There
Yay.
you go.
Yay! Yay!
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hi Maggie.
I hit the right thing.
Good, good,
Yeah,
good.
except for the name.
Yes, hi, I'm Victor.
Well, now if you go into participant, you can rename yourself.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so, does anybody have any announcements to make? We have no public comments.
I have, I don't know if this, it's
Go ahead.
announcement, it's just an FYI. This is the Mystic River. I don't know if you guys saw
Yep, we can see it.
an inspiring story.
Yep.
Take a look at it. Two teenagers mobilizing to do something about climate change, and they contacted the climate change task force in Stonington, and they really made an impression. It looks like an equivalent to our task force, and it's just a good story.
I was so struck with that, Victor, that we need to get news reporters a little better about talking about it. It made them sound like they were fighting to have climate change.
It sounded that way. But I think it was good that it was started by two teenagers.
Yep.
They were not invited by the task force. They took the initiative of going to talk to a group similar to ours. Of course, their reaction was very good. And as Eugene and I were talking earlier, so they want to declare they wanted the Stonington Task Force to declare a climate change emergency.
Right.
And the question is, so what? What does that mean? What does
Okay,
that mean?
so let me follow on with this. I heard about this whole effort to do these climate change emergency declarations at local levels. And so I went ahead and this was actually now almost a month ago that I did this. And it turns out Middletown has actually done this. They declared a climate emergency. And it looks like that was done pretty much at the prodding of Wesleyan University. And there is a whole international organization set up to get communities to declare climate emergencies. So what I did is I actually rewrote the one that came out of Middletown, and I sent it to Jesse. And I've got a written one, but Jesse and I looked at that and we thought, this would be a really heavy lift with our town council. Now I'm happy to send this around to you all to have you have a
What are
look.
the implications of declaring it emergency? Does it grant the council special powers?
Well,
Or what?
go ahead, Jesse.
It's the Citizens Climate Lobby is trying to do this, and I actually think it's patterned on the Nuclear Weapons Free campaign, where we went out to municipalities all over the country to get them to sign on to the freeze idea of no more nuclear weapons. That went from towns through, I mean, in my town where I lived then was Canton. We had a town meeting and it was overwhelmingly in favor of it. It went to the state legislature, etc. And that then went to Congress, and they did eventually actually pass the nuclear freeze resolution. My concern when I talked to, and I've been a participant in the Citizens Climate Lobby, and we went from, there's been a lot of conversation about whether it's a climate emergency, a climate crisis. It certainly is all of those things. I think my concern when Zell and I spoke about this was the political capital that Patrice would have to expend with this town council to get such a declaration. And given the work that we are doing, even though that's totally an accurate description, I think her political capital and ours as a task force is probably better focused on specific things we would like this town to do. But that's certainly open for discussion. It's just, where do we, there are specifics to this. In the nuclear freeze resolution, the towns didn't have any nuclear weapons. It was a different thing.
Well, just a quick thought about that. I agree that the use of political capital is an ace up a legislator's or a town official's sleeve that must be used wisely. And if we were to have an event such as a storm, a flood, something that really takes a toll on our town, on our region, that may be a better timing for an action like that. I think it's good that you and Zell have drafted something, and it might be, Zell, I remember reading the Middletown resolution, and I'm going to take a look at it again, but did you send yours? If you can share that with us as a draft confidentially and take a look at it, because if there are action items that would follow such a resolution, and if we were to have, heaven forbid, a bad hit, then the town council and the public may be more receptive. And
That's actually an interesting approach, Victor, because if you sort of put the emergency language within a whereas parts of the clauses, when we come up with our recommendations, therefore we recommend that boink, 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 boink. And those don't have to be as what do I want to say? Imbued with the political capital of doing everything.
Right.
I'm still not clear on what declaration of a climate emergency would mean in terms of operations.
Nothing.
Nothing. That's the problem.
We stay away
Well-
from it. Stay away from it.
Well, hypothetically, if we were to have an event that causes substantial property damage, public or private, or heaven forbid, anything personal, then I think there could be specific recommendations, and but I don't know legally what the sort of status, the emergency, if there is such a thing for our municipality. Is there a statute that codifies the authority of the town council to act in a way that is different from what it does under normal conditions? Do we know that?
I don't think there is. Again, going back to the only example I was really involved in, what it did was it was in the Connecticut legislature, it was a resolution saying this is what we were united behind, and we encouraged the following actions. And in that case, it was by Congress to pass legislation that enacted that freeze. So that's what I was sort of saying. If you say these are the whereases, and therefore we call upon the town council to do the following things, which are in their jurisdiction.
I'd move that we table the issue until we get to our discussion of the town council meeting and the
Yep, sounds good.
upcoming events.
Okay, well, if you'd like, I'll send this around, but
Please.
I do not want it to get leaked out. Absolutely don't want that to happen, because I mean, we've got a fragile relationship with the town council, and it's in good measure centered around the mayor, who's really been pushing hard for us to stay or exist. So I don't want to use that capital
Not at all.
in any way that would damage that. Do you agree, Jesse?
Yep, no, that's why I said what I said to you a month ago.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds like, so rather than table it, I mean, it sounds like you guys have talked about it and you've made a decision and you're making a recommendation to us. And I'm fine to pursue your recommendation. You're recommending that we not do it, and that instead we come up with an action plan for the town council, which was our original charter.
Yeah.
And I'm fine
But,
with
I mean, it's just so vague and so broad that it just
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
help.
fine. And you know, we reserve the right as if something else happens and we think
That's another
well,
matter.
now it's the time, but I'm fine to go with your recommendation. You guys have thought about it carefully, so.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. I just want to make the point that my intent was not to bring up the declaration of an emergency. It was just to notice the fact that two teenagers, I will call them the
Great.
public, is primed to act on climate change related issues. And we've been talking about public education and campaign and
You
so
bet.
forth. And so there it is, in action all by
Yeah, that's
itself.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else got any other announcements?
Well, the only thing that, just call your attention again to what you sent around about the Circuit Resiliency Workshop.
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Well,
just did it.
I sent around to you all just a few minutes ago, because I just got it, that there is going to be a webinar on resiliency, which is going to include the state of Connecticut, New Jersey folks, and Rhode Island. And I actually would think that may actually be pretty interesting.
And it's mostly focused on funding. So I think it's a really important one to try to, I even signed up for it. And if others aren't able to, I will try to share the info.
Yeah.
It'd be great if you
registered
could
too.
do that, Jesse.
I'm sorry.
I said it'd be great if if a couple people attend and they can
Yep.
share some of the highlights from it. That would be
Okay.
appreciated.
Well, I plan to be there if I can possibly do it.
I will be.
Yeah,
Okay.
do both. There's one in November also.
Yes, they're in
That's
November.
Connecticut. This is the joint thing of the states, which I think is really cool because we can learn from one another.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, anything further about moving on to new business about climate change resiliency related to the virus pandemic? Any other thoughts? This just sort of picks up from where we talked about before. Anybody from the floor? Okay, well, I had one thought, is that one could think of, our task force was asked to look at resiliency generally, and the word climate change does not appear in it. And I'm wondering if there's something that the task force might do or help the town council with on the notion of how do we become more resilient in the community as it is right now, without the vaccine and without any treatment. And the reason I raise this is because I unfortunately had the bad fortune of tuning into Channel 2 the other night and was listening to the town council. Stop laughing, Sarah.
Oh, boy, it was an exciting night at your
It
house.
was that exciting night. Anyhow, they were whining and complaining about, what can we do to help the local businessman? And they had all these consultants they had lined up to help. And that's okay on the economic side of it. But the fundamental problem we've got is we don't have a vaccine. We don't have any drugs to really treat this. And is there something that we might be able to offer to the town council? And as an example, how about instead of having those flashing signs that says "Go Fitch, beat Stonington," it says "Groton, wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart." I mean, it's a simple thing to do, but I wonder if there's we want to think about potentially offering something up to the community as not as our role as it relates to climate, but as our role as it relates to resiliency. I just open up to the floor.
I have a couple of thoughts, Zell, and thanks for bringing that up. A couple of weeks ago, there was a big hoopla in the media and at least in my circles about something called the Barrington Declaration. Did everybody hear about that?
Yep.
Okay, in summary, the Barrington Declaration was a very short document signed by 3 top-notch scientists, epidemiologists from Harvard, from Oxford, and from Stanford, and then co-signed by a whole bunch of very, very highly qualified infectious disease and epidemiologists about what to do about COVID. And they subscribe to something called focus intervention. And they essentially say, open up the world to for young people, for low risk individuals. Let them go to school, let them go to movie theaters, let them engage in sports, and protect the vulnerable individuals. They claim we know enough. I'm not going to get into a deep discussion about the Barrington Declaration, but I was very skeptical because the official reaction from the CDC and others, I think Fauci and others, was that's crazy. That's a no-go. And so I read it, and then I watched an interview with the 3 scientists who signed it, who authored it. And I found it extremely thought-provoking. I've already recommended that in my circles, for example, the Hastings Center for Bioethics put a panel to consider the Barrington Declaration. They essentially subscribe to the notion of herd immunity, and herd immunity can be achieved via one of two ways. Either you get infected and you get antibodies, or you get a vaccine that hopefully produces a similar effect as a native natural infection. We just don't know what the vaccine is going to do. All the requirement from the FDA is that it be, quote, 50% effective, whatever that means exactly. So I'm certainly not ready to make and to draw any conclusions, but I would be happy to send you the links to this because it is extremely thought-provoking, in my
Right
opinion.
there,
And
right here.
there.
Is it the approach that Sweden has taken? Is the Barrington Declaration? Okay.
No, there are a lot of headlines and bumper stickers calling this a libertarian approach, because from Barrington, which is more or less a libertarian institution. Others have called it a sort of a politicized thing. It's none of the above until you really go beyond what even the New York Times, I think, fell very short in describing what these very thoughtful people had to say. And so I have to say, I read it and got into it reluctantly because of that initial negative reaction. But here I am. I think it's very interesting. And back to your question, Zell, I don't know that we are the people called to advise the town about what to do about resilience on COVID, but the corollary or the so what of that to what we are doing is that it identifies actions and policies directed at vulnerable populations. We've talked about this before. All the residents in the town of Groton are not created equal. There are very different vulnerabilities. And what I find from the public health perspective, which at least Sarah and I have been thinking a lot about, is that selectivity and that proportionality to what we do and how we prepare, so that those who are most vulnerable are the ones who are getting the investment in the preparedness and the readiness and all that stuff. So I'll leave it at that.
Two things. The average age for the infection has gone down significantly over the last 3 months. Number one. Number two, just to talk about confusion, I saw a piece yesterday saying that the antibody life is limited. We don't know anything about antibody life, do we?
I mean, from what I've read in science, and I've been reading weekly this stuff, I think that's generally the consensus that I understand in the literature.
Yeah, it may mean that you have to do an annual vaccination.
Not annual. This is now, I'm infected. And I've had, my daughter actually has had it and been tested for the antibody and has the antibody or had the antibody. The
Right.
question is how long the antibody lasts.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. So the answer to that is if it is not a durable antibody, you need a yearly vaccination.
At least.
That's why you have to do it for the flu. Because the flu.
Okay, well,
The truth of the matter is that this virus, first of all, you cannot kill it because the virus is not alive. All right. So there's nothing to kill. So we're seeing it surviving a different climate. It's rampant in India. It's rampant in Brazil, where they just enter, what is going to be summer. It was rampant in our summer. So we're going to live with this thing, and the immunity that we will get or not, and that remains to be seen, is either going to come from natural infection or
Or-
from one or more of vaccines. That's it.
Okay, so let me back up a
That's the
second here.
question of the durability of that
But the
antibody.
durability, we don't know. And
don't know the
so
answer.
it is what it is.
Right.
But what
Or vaccine mediated.
okay, so I understand that we've got some real holes in the science and in the medicine of all this. I'm thinking that is there something we can do or suggest that the town simply go back to the old fashioned, 1900s way of dealing with pandemics, which is isolation, a distancing in our case, and masks. And if there's something we can say to the town council that keeps them on that focus, that would be useful. I don't think we should get into the medical end of this thing. It's way too complicated, and we don't. My sense is the scientific community doesn't really know enough to be able to do that.
I don't think I certainly don't feel I'm qualified to give an opinion. But all I can tell you is I invite you to listen to the interviews, and I'll be happy to send you the links to this.
Yeah, please.
Because
Yes, that'd be good.
the collateral damage that closing schools, it's not just the economic collateral. In the medical world, immunization rates for everything else that needs an immunization have fallen dramatically. Cancer screening has fallen dramatically. Access to routine care for things like chronic conditions has dropped significantly. So there is collateral damage to policies that are not selective and that do not balance risk and benefits for different populations. All I'm suggesting here is read, educate yourselves, and form your opinion. And whether we discuss it here, I don't know, that pertains to our mission, but it's really interesting. And
Jesse?
No, just said challenging. Incredible.
Okay. Anybody else?
Please
Maggie?
please send the link, Victor. I'd love to look at the.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Sarah?
By the way, you're going to get a link to some videos. Use I think it's the third video in a series that has the 3 leading scientists. I found that to be extremely informative. And then the declaration is very short.
Right.
Okay.
Declarations online.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else about this? Okay, I did listen to a day-long symposium that was put on by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, where Bill Gates gave a presentation that sort of described the differences between these two huge problems, and made the point that they both have catastrophic effects on the system, but they need to be treated very differently. And that if we thought that basically the COVID was a problem, it's nothing compared to what we're going to be faced with the climate problem. So if anybody wants to look that up, you're welcome to do so. They said they would send out a reference to so you could hear it again. I haven't seen that yet, but when I get it, I'll send it around. It had Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, and a whole bunch of other of the top people in the country sort of talking about COVID and climate change together. And it was a valuable, I thought, presentation. Anything else on this?
Nope.
Okay, let's move on to the next, which is discussion of the various topics that we've agreed to take on. Two parts to this. One is we need to talk at some point about sort of the format of how we're going to do this going forward. But why don't we start with a discussion with the health, which is Victor and Sarah. have put together a series of slides and made a presentation for us that seems to fit really well with the format that Victor had laid out for us. So Victor and Sarah, why don't you go ahead and take it from here?
Do you want me to do it,
Yep.
Victor?
Go, Sarah. You're
Host disabled attendee screen share.
Do what?
Host disabled attendee screen share.
Host. Okay. Okay, there you go. Oh, wait. All panelists. How's that?
Okay. Desktop. Okay, can you all see this?
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay.
nice.
Well, gosh, wait till you get to the next slide. You're gonna blow you guys away. So Victor and I have met a couple times. This is very much a draft and a work in progress, but we wanted to give you a proposed outline. So really this talks over an outline, some of the strategies and the process by which we would put together the healthcare resiliency and sustainability plan. So let's see. Good, this is going to work. So this wonderful slide comes to us from the CDC, and it's a really nice outline and a treatment. I think we get double points here for like having such a clever slide, but it talks over the key, 4 areas of climate change impact. Then if you go out into that next row and area, what that results in as a change in the ecosystem. And then the final area is an outline of what the specific human health consequence of that change is. So for example, the rising temperatures and rising sea levels, increased CO2, result in changes in pest-borne diseases and the specific topics. And we know that vector-borne disease is a concern in our area, for example, in Lyme disease. And also, much to my surprise in thinking about this in the longer term, cholera, which I didn't thought about as an issue probably in this area, but it is. So I think this outline or this framework from the CDC is a very nice visual and also an organizing principle that we can leverage to think about the different areas that we will want to look at and provide plans on with our emergency response. Victor, do you want to comment further on this or add anything to what I've said?
No, we both enjoy and love this this visual, as Sarah said. But the next layer of thinking is that a lot of these health effects represent chronic conditions or exacerbation of chronic conditions. If you have asthma, if you have COPD, if you have heart disease, if you have some immune compromise for whatever, and you are more prone to infections, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things have a chronic health substrate that can be affected by climate change. And then there is another layer, which is related to acute events. Injuries, contamination of reservoirs and water that will come in relation to an acute event or a series of acute events. So all of these things put in a time frame and their respective sort of policies and solutions is what comes behind that. But I don't have anything else.
I'll move on then. So then you get into our more austere looking slide format from here. So what we were doing here was really looking at, and hang on, let me just make you guys a little smaller. So, and
Just minimize that with the minus thing. That's what I did, so I could see
Yeah,
the slide.
right. Yep. I will do that. Thank you, Jess. Whoops. I just went back. So here were what we started off, and Victor, maybe you want to take a stab at this slide, since it was one that you assembled on the definitions for the town of Groton.
Yeah, and again, this is just draft, is food for thought. In one of the early meetings, I felt that I felt that the definition of sustainability, at least, was unclear. There's several ways of looking at sustainability, including, but I remember it's something having to do with maintaining our current quality of life, I don't know, standard of living, etc., preserving what we have. And I felt we had to come to a consensus and perhaps some definitions. So I went looking around for formal definitions, and there are a bunch of them. And so I put these as reasonable, and they're a composite of what's out there. So resilience an individual or a community's capacity to withstand adversity, to bounce back after stress, trauma, or hardship. Bounce back could be to baseline or to a permanent new condition that is better than before or not. And I thought that was generic enough that, and it conveyed the sense of the word resilience. And sustainability, I felt this definition was also attractive, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So I would like to just pause here and see what you'll think about these definitions, and are they concrete enough that we can build recommendations eventually to the town council based on these things, on these definitions.
Yeah, because these are not unique to our section, but they're
No.
broader, right?
Exactly.
The only, I mean, I think particularly the sustainability definition is one that's used pretty widely. The thing that I find missing in this is the earth itself.
Right.
And to somehow, resilience is for the planet to continue to provide, and sustainability for the planet, because it is this interplay between we and all of wildlife and everything else on the planet. And so somehow, and I can't do it just looking at these right now, I would love to try to incorporate some component of the sustainability and resilience of the planet as we know it.
I agree.
Yeah, the way I look at these two, and I thought about them when I was working on my piece, sustainability to me is a long-term concept. It's not so much meeting the needs of the present, compromising the ability of the future. The idea is that we want to be able to continue to live in this area. We don't want it to be a desert. We don't want it to be too terribly hot. So it's a longer term, whereas resilience tends to, my mind, of course, resilience is also part of sustainability, but resilience, I've been treating it as more the immediate. We get a storm, we get an epidemic. How do we handle that? And of course, mind you now, I'm looking at all of this in terms of actions. And to me, sustainability, the fundamental issue in sustainability is the carbon footprint of the town. How do you reduce that? Because you're part of the global effort to reduce that. And so in order for sustainability to mean something to us, for us to stay here living, we've got to reduce our carbon footprint. Resilience may be more the matter of how we adapt to a particular storm or a particular, that's short, really short term, or a longer term rising sea level, that sort of thing. So I distinguish between the two in terms of timescales.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Frank. Sort of its sustainability is acting in a way now that does not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs.
right, to live there, right.
Well, I mean, what that does, Frank, and I completely agree with Frank on this. I mean, reducing our carbon footprint, we can do that individually and we can do it as a community. So this really falls right squarely into our jurisdiction, if you will. So I think that's pretty good. And I think that's a good point here.
I've heard from others. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, that's a good discussion. I mean, how do you want to work through finalizing, definitions for each of these, which then we'll all use
Yep.
be used in the parent section.
Yeah, I think offline I mentioned to Sarah that I had heard some additional suggestions about resilience and the inclusion of the Earth, the entire planet, essentially. And I thought that was an absolutely right on comment. My only question is, we are talking about the town of Groton. And I get the sense that when we include verbiage that talks about the planet, while accurate and completely in agreement with it, it creates a sense of almost impossibility for our town to do something about it. So individual and community is something that conceptually we can put our arms around. And I think people tend to think in a very concrete terms sometimes. And so I will be perfectly fine with expanding the language to include a more global perspective. But I think there is a certain practicality about what our task, being our local contribution, that I also find attractive. That's my only comment.
Yeah, I agree with Victor.
And I don't think we should wordsmith tonight, but
No, I don't either.
I think the way it ties back to the community, and this is a book that Ms. Elle and I were talking about, is sustainability for the town is taking actions that don't exacerbate the ability of Earth to be sustainable.
Well, another way to put that, I think, is to, I mean, I tend to agree with the notion of it's pretty grandiose for us to think about global, but if we say that we need to operate in a way that's in concert with, or I'm not sure what the word is, with the natural system that we live in, then we've done that. So I think how we wordsmith that becomes pretty crucial.
So what do you want to do as a next step to try to, get agreement amongst us of what the definitions for these two are?
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, there's two things that I think we need to do. One is that the state has already worked on these two items. We need to go back and look and see what the state has. I've got them printed out here. I can't grab them because they're in a big pile here, but look at what the state's done. And then I think look at how that then fits with what this discussion's been about.
Okay, so are you taking that action then?
Am I? I thought you were.
Well, how am I going to look through your paperwork?
Oh, no, I'll get the paperwork for you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I don't know how, I don't know how much.
I like it when I give him actions. All right, moving swiftly along then.
Yes.
Well, there we go. Okay, so then we next moved on to what the objectives were for the work. And they were to reduce the risk to health and safety by climate change by increasing individual and institutional resilience, adapting sustainable individual behaviors as well as institutional policies, And then to identify and engage the groups of Groton residents to participate in developing the plan. And to ensure, and here was where we really introduced the theme of equity, to ensure equitable health and safety resources in response to climate change threats. So we felt it was a reduced risk and then identify a plan. Okay.
I like that. I think it's going to be hard to do that second part of that right now.
Yes,
Yeah, we
I
agree.
do too.
We don't say immediately.
I think that is going to be one to figure out via the council. I would think through our library and school system, there might be some clever ways you can do this, but
Yeah.
it is going to be a challenge.
Could you drop me back onto that?
But
Yeah, would you go
Oh.
back to the last slide, Sarah?
yep,
No.
this one.
No.
Yes,
okay.
yes, that one.
Then,
Yeah, my coordinate. Sure.
okay.
Yeah,
I don't understand where the schooling is coming in.
I'm saying as an example of how you would develop the plan with a diverse group of residents participating in it. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
everybody.
that's part of the education and development piece.
Right.
There is a strategy slide later on, Sarah, that
Yeah, maybe it's
this
just
is
better.
just the objectives. I think your next slide will probably,
So if you could just, Mel, maybe this is it, but I was just going to back up to the one you just had up, Sarah. And
Sure.
so increasing individual and institutional resilience to climate change stresses by. So I think what the town council is looking for is some specific steps that we think will do
Exactly.
that.
we
So
need
to just go on those with a colon, blah, 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 blah.
Yes. Yep. And
Yeah,
what this deck is intended to do is really outline the process
Okay,
by which we will agree to those specific steps.
yep.
So more or less these objectives for us,
Correct.
right?
Oh, okay. That makes it much clearer. So we should define those things going forward, correct?
Yep. And coming
And
up
prioritize.
slide is our proposal of how to do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
This just happens to be dealing with, I'll abbreviate, health and safety,
Correct.
because I have an education piece in mind
Mhm.
that speaks almost exactly to the diverse groups of residents need to buy in, ...
Right.
And what do you mean by a diverse group of residents? I talk about the school kids. I talk about the citizen. I talk about the town council.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
Okay, so the strategy would be then, Victor, do you want to jump in at some, I mean, anywhere here and take?
You're doing great, Sarah. Carry
Okay.
on.
So the strategy, well, I know where you'll come in on the next slide anyway, right? Because we'll get into the specifics of how we want to build out the actions. But the strategy is really to look at the time-bound horizon of near-term, mid-term, long-term investment while identifying kind of an idealized state of where we want to be. I mean, what's the long-term vision of where you want to be in all this? And I think whether that's the declaration of carbon neutrality or you know, the definitions we talked about earlier on sustainability, this is the context to it. Position the plan to proactively or opportunistically be available so that you can seek funding up, you know, as these opportunities arise. I know you guys are going to this talk, which in part will speak about Hurricane Sandy and all of the opportunity that occurred or that arose from that, that has benefited the towns of New Haven and Fairfield and their ability to invest in some climate change, you know, investments and mitigation plans. And then importantly, I think that our plans need to have a monitoring part, I mean, some kind of measurement of progress, ownership, And then an easy mechanism, whether it's that every 5 years you recreate a task force, I don't happen to think that's really easy, but some way to refresh and reinvigorate the plan so that you're going to have this constant rolling 5, 10, 30 aspect to it.
I
Yeah.
think that last point is extremely important. I mean, part just as an example, New Orleans wouldn't be in quite the problem it is in now if it had spent more time thinking about this particular item. Yeah,
Yep.
they didn't pay attention to maintaining the dikes as an example.
Right. Now, the other side of that, because of course, we're up to our ears in all of that, right? For 10 years, we've been looking at reports of projects and plans and all of it. Is that, at least amongst this group, parenthetical, this is quiet, right? This idea of keeping an eye on what's going on and having a 5-year review is sometimes a tool that's used by politicians to do nothing. They're able to point to the efforts to go out and refresh and reinvigorate, and they use that as an example of their abilities to do something, and they're really doing nothing. So we want to be careful in how we use this. We want to front it with action, and then review the need for and the form of on a regular basis.
Yeah, you'd actually like a scorecard,
Yeah.
Or of some kind.
Right.
Well, when the town did its energy plan back in 2012 or something,
Yeah.
it then hired a graduate student to evaluate what had actually happened on that. So it's that kind of process. So we all have read umpteen plans of the town as to what should happen. And we have spent time dealing with all those departments about what they've actually done. So I think that is the process. We come up with recommendations. The energy plan is a good one for the sustainability part and what we haven't done. And so it's not a 5-year, have we made, well, it is a 5-year, have we made progress? It's an accountability process.
That's right. Honest critical review.
It goes to the issue of if you are going to try to manage something, you're going to have to measure it. And that's part of that whole process.
Accountability.
So far, what we've presented really is general, right? Like any of these top couple slides apply to any of our sections. And
That's
so
right.
I think what this outlines is something really important, which is, the sort of stake in the ground, some of which we've talked about, and then what we want to put in place to ensure ownership, monitoring, and implementation.
Right.
Let me give you a little bit of lessons learned from COVID. Just went through. I was recently involved in the assessment, in the evaluation of a whole bunch of research proposals that create value in healthcare. These are very large grants. So these RFPs attract the top researchers in the United States. And there was a preponderance of research related to telemedicine. And it absolutely killed me to see these proposals looking at evaluating how all these mega institutions reacted with an improvised overnight solution to deploy telemedicine to meet the needs of the populations they serve. And they were willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this when quietly on the side, there were organizations that for a long time have known the advantages of telemedicine and organized it, deployed it, are making a ton of money. And nobody proposed to investigate or look and understand how those who did it on the non-crisis conditions did it and did it so very well. The two lessons that that keeps reinforcing in my mind is, number one, that I am also sick and tired of looking at documents that say we should do this, we should do that, but that they trigger no action. Climate emergency, they trigger no action. The one argument that some have used is to really learn more about from what they call persuasion professionals. And persuasion professionals are more capable than others to persuade a company or maybe a town council to take some actions. And one of the main ways to do that is to tie a business benefit, a revenue benefit, a business case for example, an energy plan. Zen and I were talking about the maintenance cost of a police car, of an electric police car versus a fossil fuel police car. In 1 year, you can begin to amortize big time the maintenance cost of one of these vehicles. And so we need to pay some attention to how we pitch these ideas so that they can elicit action. And that is more, I think, behavioral economic stuff. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
Totally off mark, whatever. But Victor, you need to take the policeman in Groton for a ride in your Tesla and tell them how it can rev up.
it may be that you are a persuasion professional, dispensing advice on how to do that. But we need a lot of that.
That's a hell of a term, persuasion professional. I'll have to remember.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm learning in my consulting world.
No,
Moving along then.
I have an idea that some of us call it something else that's probably not as polite.
So just some idea of like, okay, well, how would you go about it in this process? And the idea was to engage, the woman who heads up the emergency crisis response for Ledgelight Health District, perhaps the town manager, the chief of police who's in charge of emergency response and came to our meetings. And then it would be nice to get a couple of the town council members to identify an area of focus that they want to help with and participate.
That's a great idea.
I mean, I think a lot of them are interested, and I think if we got them, one person actively engaged here, that would be a great thing. And then the idea would be that this team would meet with Victor and I, and maybe we'll come up with some others, other people to contribute, and determine the learnings from COVID. They've got to be big. Identify some investments, particularly in that 5-year horizon, to meet emergency needs. So that goes at that kind of resilience piece that we talk about. And then build out this action spreadsheet. And here's now where I'll turn it over to Victor to discuss it. But I identify, engage in joint brainstorms. Now, I would suggest that that's what we use our meetings for. That we take on these sections and we try to build out the details and the action plans, with an invite list of a broader group that we think is representative of who needs to own responsibility for ultimately engaging in the plan, and also who has a vested interest in it. So this is our idea. The next pieces then we'll go through are the spreadsheets of actions specific to the healthcare plan. Sound
Okay.
good?
Yes.
You guys
Yes, great.
ready to move on? So Victor, now it goes over to you.
Do you have a next slide?
I do. You want to just
Let's skip that one because following on this idea that building the specifics could include something like 3 steps. One is raising awareness of climate change and health impacts. These are campaigns and educational process. And the difference between awareness and education is education digs deeper. It goes into facts, into a little bit more detail. And then the town investments are derived from that. But we just put these images here. The first slide would take specific topics and build recommendations for long-term mitigation. This would be, Frank, what you're calling sustainability, and put specific action items here. And the same thing for short-term events on the right. A lot of this has already been done. Preparedness, response. There is not very much on recovery because recovery is event specific. We're talking about a blizzard, we're talking about anything else. But the images that we just selected reflect the different domains of climate change that affect human health. And if we follow a process that Sarah described, then we can begin to put sort of meat on the bones. But it's not going to be just us. It's going to be people responsible at the official level, let's say government level, and experts, and of course, some selected town officials who may be interested in some of these areas. And Sarah, you and I did not talk about this, but I sense that these would not be task force meetings. These would be offline, more discussion.
Yeah, they could be. I mean, it's either we're going to have to go offline and then report back in, or because all of us have limited amount of time, decide that we leverage the joint meetings this way for a period of time. I mean,
Well, I like what you're doing here. And let me say, I think if we can, basically what we're doing is we, the task force, would be acting as consultants to the town in particular and work with specific individuals in the town. And part of the purpose of that is so that we get buy-in from the town. And I think that's so important because so many of these tasks, so many of these reports that we've seen have been done by consultants, and they were laid on the town, and the town employees and the political people haven't really bought into the process.
Right.
And by shoving this over and having us work as consultants with these people, we may not want to call ourselves that, but call ourselves as members of the task force, help them do this, then that's where we're going to really get things to happen, is when they buy in, they put in their budgets the information or the requirements they
need to be joint. There needs to be co-creation here.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're getting installation of the idea, and it's not going to work.
Right.
Exactly.
So if the task force, I'm just thinking about that, I'm thinking about the 20 inches by 2050, the guidelines. So rather than being proscriptive, that sort of every decision the town council and town departments make must take into consideration and justify the following: bump, 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 bump. Does this advance? Does it create a detriment? Does it? I mean, I'm just thinking that, that's what the state has tried to do. So that's what the town needs to do. We're expending money every single day. We're making decisions every single day. Let's ensure that those decisions have taken into account the following with the following parameters.
Yeah, can you put up the previous slide? Just following on that comment by Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't, I have a different slide in mind. You can go forward again. You can ignore this. I've worked on this quite a bit since then. I completely agree with that suggestion. And ultimately is reducing the footprint, which was the way we started this conversation, reducing the footprint, the carbon footprint of the town. And that's our contribution to the global crisis.
Right. If we, I'm thinking that we're gonna probably be putting some flesh on these bones, but and in line with what Jess was saying, I look at health and I'm looking at that handsome slide, corner, lower, the southwest corner of your slide there. Trying to bring it home. And I think this summer, for example, the matter of 90-degree days was of some interest. And we're having every indication that the number of 90-degree days we have is increasing. How does that affect things like sheltering or the amount of air conditioning, cost of air conditioning, and the equity of it? Some folks can't afford air conditioning. Can we bring some concrete examples and all the time thinking about at part of a plan, you're thinking about how you should be building this item.
I agree,
more,
Frank.
you know, as we go through it, because there's a fair number of these guys down here that don't apply here.
Yeah, you want to pick the ones that are most relevant to your situation.
Right. And so I'm just sitting here babbling, looking at that. But as we begin to put flesh on the bones, I think we can put some data and some examples that are evidence that this is ongoing right now. And we have to think it's going to get worse over the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And what we have is the state of Connecticut does a 5-year rolling plan every year, well, it's got to be, it's a 5-year rolling plan of their top priorities, so we can build off of that. I was thinking they also had a 10-year cycle to something, but anyway, there's a lot out there of what the direct impact is to Connecticut.
Frank, related to your recommendation, I distributed to our group a very good document put together by the Yale Climate Change and Sustainability that has probably the best data available for Connecticut.
Yeah.
And I'm selecting some of the graphs that show trends in temperature, that the extreme heat days, precipitation. There is one, frost days, et cetera, et cetera. I actually looking at a slide that I'm putting together to put meat on the bones.
Right.
And
Yeah, it is clear what things do apply here. I mean, you know, you can take a look at the water reservoir in Stonington, for example, if you want to see an impact of, you know, the stage 3 drought going on right now.
Yeah.
Right.
If you let me share my screen here, I can put up one slide, and then
I think we're almost done, Victor. Do you want me to just do? I think this is our last slide. So it was just some of our key links and resources, you know, that we're talking about. But this was basically our presentation. So if you want, I can stop sharing at this point. And and you can.
Then Victor can.
I like the idea of putting specifics, so putting meat on the bones.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean, so Victor and Sarah, do you guys want to try to do that and come back next time?
I guess the question is, should we put some further meat on the bones? Or should we engage the folks that we know at this point are also going to be participants in it? And I think that's,
not clear.
I am not, I don't know that it would be very productive for us to start putting
Yeah.
the bones, because we are not calling the shots here. What we could do is we could prepare something that, I don't know if for the town council or some other group of individuals, and say, these are hard facts that have a direct, a cause and effect relationship with human health and other factors. These are the trends. This is what we can clearly forecast to be the impacts, and what are the resilience and sustainability measures that you think would meet the needs of these trends, would mitigate or would help us prepare. And as Zell was saying, we can be more consultants, because they will have this information.
are you guys thinking that we need like one more step of specificity to, if you go back to that first slide or this last slide that we kind of ended with?
I think you need more specific. I mean, the town council,
Areas of concern to Groton, Connecticut.
yeah, I do think that's
What are the top 5 things you really have to address
So,
in heat-related illness, for example, or in,
Correct.
Yeah.
drought or
Pick a
whatever.
name, right.
so I think Zell is going to
Conservation.
talk about this later, but I think we are going to end up meeting with the town council in December.
Yeah.
And so
November.
the broad perspective of what the challenges are, you guys have presented incredibly, but to come down to what might we ask the town council to actually do with any of those is where we need to focus at this point. And the broader context is out there forever, but it is like, okay, in your realm, what do you think Groton, town council, town, city should do? And I think Frank is going to do the exact same thing going forward, because I think our relevance is going to be related to the degree that we can make it local. The big picture is enormous and overwhelming.
Well-
But what we want to do is to try to help the town and residents of the town pick
and-
up a piece of it.
So we saw that step though as being built jointly with the people that were identified on the slide. And I agree with you,
Sorry,
there's a
what?
little bit of a.
I'm
step
sorry, back
before
up,
that.
Sarah. I didn't get that.
Well, that's because, yeah, okay. So I agree with you that we need more specificity. So I guess the only question is, are we saying that we need to generate a layer that's a little closer to home before we engage the people that we expect to generate the actions with?
I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
And also, you don't need to generate all of the issues that are before us. You just need to generate 1 or 2 that we can take to the council as a starting point. And think of this
The
as
starting point examples.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's an ongoing process. For example,
We got to get a buy-in. We have to get a buy-in.
yeah, you may start with
Well, heat related,
heat.
heat related is going to be the big one.
that could be the big one.
Storm and
You
probably vector-borne disease.
Yeah, or Frank's might be, how do we get low-lying roads so that they last another 30 years, period. And then that is a starting point for how we get into public works. Yours is a starting point of how we get into the health side.
Yeah, I have the impression that when it comes to short-term measures, there is a lot already in the books. And in fact, Groton, as part of Region 4 of the Emergency Preparedness Program, has a very detailed plan already. And the Chief of Police is aware of it. The Legislative Health District know it. So we can, if we want to put specifics, we can say for acute events, we have plans. And not only that, there are ongoing training programs, simulation exercises, cooling centers, mass vaccination, a storm shelter, power outages. What do you do with food? What do you do with medications that need refrigeration if you don't have a generator? All of those things are written to, I think, most people's satisfaction. The hard part is going to be the medium and long-term investments. Because on health, I can tell you that it's essentially a mega dose of prevention so that you will be resilient. It's not something, it's not an emergency thing. It's individual behaviors, like we said in this slide. And that's a much tougher message because there is no sense of urgency.
Right. Well, that whole business about clear and present danger is affecting all aspects of this.
Right,
That's one reason why we can ignore climate change, because my roof didn't fall in today.
right.
If you're in Louisiana, you might be questioning that.
I know, I got an ash out here that's
They've forgotten it, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, I do think that that's good to hear, Victor. You sort of answered part of the question.
Mhm.
So in your professional opinion, as you reviewed the issue, looking down the road over the next year, you believe that there is sufficient, I'm now talking hardware, personnel, and support equipment, as well as facilities, to handle the foreseeable health emergencies over this next year. That's the acute. The question comes, we're back now to our friend talking about the pandemic possibilities in 2015, Bill Gates, and everybody said, yeah, fine, that's great. And they went on their way, and here we are. So you say to somebody, you got to start stashing face masks, PPE, whatever.
Mhm.
And that means putting up so many 100,000 a year or so on a regular basis. That's for now, for the foreseeable future. That gets tough. That storyline is tough. But I think we all have that to some extent. That this is the issue with climate change. It's easy to ignore in the short term.
And it's difficult to
The
plan.
book that Zal gave us, right?
Yes.
I just had my appointment with my PCP and got my flu shot, and I asked him how things are going, and he said we're having a scarcity of needles. I
Wow.
said, what? Of
Did you get-
needles?
Did you get the double? Did you get the over 65?
Yeah, I got the double.
Yeah, we didn't.
But I asked him, what the hell's happening with needles? What are we like, not the Chinese are not sending us needles or what? And he didn't know, but he suspects
Op-eds.
that there is a huge hoarding of needles for dispensing the COVID vaccine.
Wow. Wow.
So here's an example of sustainability, of doing something today so that we do not jeopardize the benefits of
Future
people
health.
in the future.
Yep.
Right.
It's just something that simple.
Right.
They don't have enough needles. Give me a break.
Right. It's running out of Band-Aids. What are we talking about?
Hey,
Oh, my Lord.
anything further from Victor or Sarah?
Mm-mm.
Great start.
Anything, I think a
Thank
nice
you,
start.
Good job.
Anybody, Frank or Jesse or Maggie, any comments?
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Well
I
done.
should as Zell said, talk about the format that the rest of us present our thoughts about, because the PowerPoint for me is way easier than Victor's grid.
Okay,
You're not an Excel spreadsheet woman.
No, because it just won't let me hit return and put more data in.
I have had a very frustrating time with it myself, so Jesse's not alone.
Well, slides work. I mean,
Slides
ultimately.
works
you have
every
to-
time.
You have
Yeah.
to reduce it down to something readable, right?
No, slides are great, and then we can translate it into whatever format we want.
Okay,
Well,
so
ultimately, whatever document or whatever we collect together, it's got to be kind of concise and to the point. And so
Absolutely.
maybe this
Absolutely.
upfront part is the universal upfront, and then there are the specific actions for each of the sections.
Yep.
And how they're done over the 5, 10, and 30-year
Well-
period and agreed to.
I'm
I'm
of the
not in for 30, dear.
I'm of the opinion they don't all have to be similar. Because I think what we will ultimately end up doing is taking these issues case by case to the town council. And we just need to figure out how best to do that so that they will understand what we're doing. It doesn't, I mean, it just may vary from topic to topic, and that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've talked to several of you about, or I guess all of you about, is that I don't want to end up creating another report that sits on a damn shelf.
Amen.
Don't want to do that. We've got too many documents sitting on shelves that have only been partially looked at and mostly forgotten. And I don't want to do that. I want to have something, and I want to hold the town council to a situation where they pretty much have to engage with us on a case-by-case basis with the town staff to make this all work. I mean, does anybody have a problem with that?
Not at all.
Okay, let's move on. You'll all recall we started out with the Groton Long Point Bridge when we first all got together, and we had a couple of flurries of meetings, and then nothing happened. And then we ended up asking Dr. Poland to represent us. And so, Frank, do you want to sort of talk about what happened at the most recent meeting and where we're going?
Not the most recent meeting, the first meeting of the new Groton Long Point Bridge Task Force. God help us. It may in part be the basis for my earlier comment about planning dodges. Let's hope not. Thursday night, about a week ago, last Thursday night, we had the first meeting of the Groton Long Point Bridge Task Force. And it was chaired by Public Works. Greg Hanover is the chairman of it. And he called this group together. John Burt was there. There were representatives from Mumford Cove, Groton Long Point, this task force. That was about it. It was a fairly small group. And it was received a presentation that was not terribly much different than the presentation we received from the engineers. AECOM is the engineering group now. A fellow named Platouche is in your file. It gave a 35-slide presentation on the bridge. What it is and what it may be. And that was it, basically. That was the meeting. There has been fundamentally nothing done. You recall that present at our meeting, in addition to AECOM and the town engineers, were Megan Raymond and a guy named Nash, Gary Nash, from Malone and McBroom. And Malone and McBroom are taking care of permitting and the hydraulic studies. It's related to the design of the bridge. They have not been asked to start. Presumably after this meeting, maybe the next meeting, they will be asked to start. Presumably, all of this is being directed at some way to raise money for this project, depending on what it is. Either federal, state, or federal, state, and town participation, much in the way the school went. But how that is going to proceed is not clear. There may be a referendum, and if there was a referendum, all of the design work and the cost, all the planning and cost basis has to be in place by April of next year for a November referendum vote. So there may be a little bit of urgency, but presumably the town is going to come back and give some idea of how they prefer to fund this. Of course, I guess we would prefer to fund it, somebody else paid for it, but we're talking about framework stuff, right? No real fact of the whole thing.
But no design framework.
No design framework.
Unbelievable.
And there's preferred designs in terms of layout, a sidewalk, a wider roadway, a rampway along the side, a partial rampway along the side. It was not terribly much different than what you heard.
Okay. Was there any update on the hydraulic part of
Nothing.
water going through there and
Nothing.
what that
No
would
work.
impact
There's
in Palmer
no-
Cove and Esker Beach Cove and all that?
Nothing. No work done on any of it.
Unbelievable.
That's where we are. We expect.
Have they been contracted and paid to have done all that and it wasn't done, or?
AECom is under contract and has done some amount of work, but it doesn't appear they've done much yet. They're going to be getting at it in terms of designs. And they're looking, all they keep talking about is full participation by the community.
So
You
Frank,
realize what that means. You realize what that means to the cynic, right?
right. So Frank, maybe this goes offline, but you've been involved in this. Do you have recommendations that we should incorporate into any recommend? Obviously, it's not going to happen soon. So does the task force, on the basis of hydraulics, sea level rise, all that kind of thing, do we have thoughts that we should be sending to the town council? Because that's actually what the mayor asked us for initially.
I think it's, if you did that right now, you'd be going around Greg's task force. And it's supposed to be going into the task force. And they certainly know who I am. We did ask about elevations and the rest of it, and they came right up, because they talked about the bridge heights, and then they talked about some problems with the roadway before they were ever raised by me. So it was, and then I got into the discussion. Of course, I asked about the hydraulic studies, and that's when I heard that nothing has been done on it. And I have a query into Nash to see just where they are and what they need to get going on it.
So maybe you and I should have a offline discussion, because as I look at some of the resilience recommendations for the whole area, whatever happens with that bridge needs to be tied with what happens at Esker Point Beach, what happens at Palmer Cove, what happens going up into Haley Farm, to try to provide opportunity for marsh migration and better filtration and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that actually could be useful recommendations to the town if they're not moving forward on this very quickly.
Right. The matter of marsh, just to jump onto that one for a second, I was going to be talking with Maggie about some of that. That whole plot that you just mentioned, I have defined as a critical area.
Yeah,
in my write-up.
absolutely.
In my write-up.
I agree.
Mine and what I'm going to say whenever we do it, but it's just like, okay, if we're going to get funding to do something there, let's do a much bigger project that has some other benefits to it.
Yeah. in any event, the task force is to meet monthly Thursday night. 6:30, I think. Which is great for dinner in this household. So. Any event, we will certainly be keeping you informed on how this proceeds.
Okay, great.
Frank, who is on from Mumford Cove? Who's on the
I don't-
task force?
I don't know the names, Mag. I can probably get the list for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yeah.
I can work as a persuasion professional.
That's it. That's right.
Perfect.
Okay. Also, Frank, do you just want to quickly mention that what you've been doing with the road sea level rise issue?
No, but I can't do it quickly. Other than the, I started outlining, as I outline, that means I'm writing my section on focusing on sea level rise and coastal features. And I've defined something in excess of 6 areas as critical areas. It's interesting as you walk along the coastline of Groton that the coastline of Groton is pretty tough and pretty resilient.
Yep.
You know, you can run a hurricane up on Avery Point and not have too much of an effect. And Bluff Point, you're not going to bother many people, sort of thing, until you get to places like Groton Long Point. You get downtown Mystic, Gravel, and Pearl Streets area, Wilson Point, and a few others. You just go around. There's 6 points that I have on this. And then what do you do in those? And there's some recommendations on how to proceed in those. And primary, and a lot of it is the raising of the road. That we ought to be developing a plan, an action plan. We don't, as you heard from the town engineer, have any plan to raise roads. And we heard again the other night on the bridge task force discussion, some of the whys of it. So that's an issue that has some concrete or asphalt basis in discussion. And there are other issues like raising houses, abandonment. What do we do if should we have at some point you're on Jupiter Point and you're flooded on a fairly regular basis? Should you be allowed to rebuild? We got into a little discussion of FEMA and the FEMA insurance, the problems there, and the town's role in the management of payments and FEMA insurance. So it's an ongoing effort.
It'll be interesting to see, won't it, Frank, how much this starts impacting, real estate in the near term and going forward. Because now these FEMA ratings are much more transparent to people as you buy a house.
You bet.
They
And
now
the,
have a rating.
And the flood frequency is part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming. And so one of the things that I did, I was telling Zell earlier, some of you weren't on, is I've gotten into property valuations. So work around those 6 critical areas and take a look at what those properties, if they weren't present, what it means to the town grand list.
And
On the one hand, that's if you removed them. But on the other hand, you get a property valuation and what it means in the sort of short term and then longer term value of the property and what that means in terms of taxation. So that's an issue that I think we can address. We can quantify some of these concepts.
Okay, any other comments about this?
Has there been any reaction or defensiveness from the real estate business community? Because when we start talking about property values, in addition to taxes, we're also talking about property value, resale value, and worth of commissions and eventually livelihood.
You bet.
Right now, they're all totally pumped because, everything's for sale and all of these people are buying second homes.
That's today. But I think just we had state insurance people coming down 3 and 4 years ago, telling us about changes in valuation of property across the state. And that was one of the issues in Fairfield in particular.
Absolutely.
So that's an issue that's been addressed and there, it is quantified.
Isn't Groton getting ready for a new assessment?
Yes.
In the process right now.
That's what I thought.
Okay, I guess Jesse's working on her side of things, and we don't have to have a conversation about that tonight. I'm working on mine. I don't know whether Maggie, you've had a chance to look on the on your side of what you had agreed to do. But
I was going to coordinate with Frank, I think.
so
You
my
agreed.
only suggestion to everybody is we continue to work
Yeah.
on these things separately and bring it together at some point. I'd like to jump over to the next issue, which is timing. I don't think we have to have a final report, but the town council would like to meet with us on December 8th.
Wait a minute.
And that came about as a result of a meeting that Jesse and I had with the town manager and with the mayor. And the fundamental purpose for that meeting was to let both of them know that we felt that we absolutely needed to get a person on board in the town as a manager of resiliency and sustainability, and that the town had to stop fooling around with this and they had to get to it because we're losing a huge number of opportunities to get money for the community to address these issues. The short of it is that both the manager and the mayor are all behind us, but I don't think they feel they've got at this point a full deck of backing them up. One of the questions again that was raised was, well, what would this person do? And so I'm working on a little list of things that they would do. Actually, I've already provided that list a year ago. They didn't bother to read it. But we need to work on that thing because the town right now is working on the capital budget for next year. And as soon as beginning of in January, they then start working on the operating budget. And it's the operating budget where this all has to go into. Jesse, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it comes back to some of the comments on Victor's and Sarah's presentation that when we meet with the town council in December, and we did have a conversation with the mayor and John Burt at the time about trying to run by them some of the concrete actions that we would try to present to the town council that justify the hiring of somebody and the money for doing that. This webinar tomorrow, which is really focused on funding and the opportunities for that. So I think for each of us in the areas that we're working on to try to come up with short-term, concrete ideas that the town could apply for grants with if they had somebody like this. And as Dell has said many times, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, if things go on Tuesday the way we'd like them to go, there is likely to be a new American Recovery Act as soon as a new administration takes office. And so to have projects, things that are in the old parlance of Obama's first administration, shovel ready, that we could actually say, this is something we could do, or this is something we could apply for. And Zell and I have spent hours looking at, there is so much money out there, but you have to write a grant to get it. And so to come up with things that we think further the purpose of whatever our individual part of this is, wetlands restoration along Esker Point, all that kind of thing, and try to put them in a form that when we talk with the town council in December, they say, oh, that makes sense. Because the reality is in that most municipalities that have hired somebody to do this, they've more than paid for themselves in the grant money that they get. And I think that's got to be our mantra when we go to them to say, you need to fund this person. And it's not just the sort of resilience part of it. It is also the sustainability part. Brantford, the town of Brantford is just inaugurated for the rest of this year because they took advantage of the opportunity to do a town-wide drive on the installation of heat pumps, because home energy audits are free for the rest of the year because nobody's been inviting people into their homes. So there are so many opportunities that we need to come up with specifics, and I would say a couple in each area. We don't want to overwhelm them, but realistic kinds of things that we can take to the town council in December.
Yeah, and the point here is that not only is this person going to write the grant, but they're probably going to have to end up managing it.
Absolutely, because
Those
the
are
accountability is huge. That's one of the biggest challenges.
a huge effort, particularly as you get into the federal grant system.
Yep.
It just requires a huge amount of effort. So I think we're in a good place. I don't want to overwhelm the town council. If we came in with 5 ideas, that would be enough to get this thing going. I mean, they tend to be very focused on, their own backyards, but nevertheless, if we can make the case, I think we should go for it. Because I, for one, don't think much is going to happen unless we do this.
Nope.
Well, one of the things that strikes me in all of this as we go along, I went back and looked at some notes, and there were so many issues that there was no policy in the council.
Yeah, good point, Frank.
Beyond the policy not to spend money. And that is, with that in mind, that's a hell of a challenge for us, because me, for one, I'm trying to ask them to establish something of a fund, if not honest to God dollars and cents, at least a bureaucratic fund that'll deal with issues that may not confront us for 20 years, 30 years. We got to start them thinking long-term. Now, let's say in my case, it came up because I was thinking about how the town might help you to move your house, to jack up your house. Well, the town doesn't have anything like a fund for that right now. And if they gave you tax relief, they would probably be confronted by some political issues. The uptown didn't want the downtown to have it, or whatever it was, going back and forth. But we do have some history for that in the acquisition of open space.
Yep.
There's supposed to be some number of dollars laid aside yearly for that. Could we use that as a model to get them to start thinking about a long-term fund, laying aside each year a few $100,000? We got to get this ball rolling, and hopefully it will get bigger as it goes off down the road. But I think that we have an issue with policy concepts in the council that affects all of our work.
They have asked us for that directly. It's a good point.
So one of the things we actually mentioned to the mayor and John when we met with them is that last year, the legislature passed an act that enabled municipalities to establish a coastal resilience and municipal climate change fund, and to purchase either repeated loss properties or provide match for federal grants and things like that. Right. And the allocation that you referred to, Frank, about into an open space fund has not occurred for several years. Right. But one of the things that I think Zell's comments that we all endorse, but thank you for writing, Zell, to the Conservation Commission and the open space plan that came out in the revised version of it, is actually a focus on coastal lands that provide opportunity for marsh migration and things. And so if we can tie those things together and get minimal funding to put into it, those funds can provide matches for things that we might apply for if there is a new wave of federal funding that could be attached to the building of the Groton Long Point Bridge. So let's, invigorate that marsh and clear it out so that there's more tidal flow through it and that kind of thing.
One of the ways that I had suggested this happened 10 years ago now is that in all the energy efficiency work, if the town was, for example, able to save $100,000 because they put in new light bulbs, that saved $100,000 ought to be put into a fund so it could fund more energy efficiency.
Yep.
It ends up being a revolving fund, and there's no reason why we can't do this across the whole board so that it doesn't make it a really expensive process for the community. It self-funds itself. And that, I think, is something that economically they will like. Other thoughts? God, that was a show.
You're running out of time. Sarah's gonna leave.
Right.
Hypoglycemia starts.
Sure.
Okay, any other thoughts at this point?
Boy,
Well, I think, listen, I'd like to thank you all, and Victor and Sarah particularly, for the great effort you put in. And hopefully we'll have a meeting. Our next meeting is November.
We're scheduled for the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. So
You want to back it up?
Yeah, that is no good.
That's no good.
what
The night before Thanksgiving? No, it's not good.
Does the 24th work?
Wait a minute, you're further back than that.
I thought that was,
We're not gathering anybody for Thanksgiving. That's-
Neither am I.
Well, Thanksgiving is the next week anyway.
it's the next
You're-
beginning.
Oh, it's the week before.
26th.
It's the week before
Week
Thanksgiving.
before.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, it's the
Yeah, okay.
25th. No,
I thought-
Thanksgiving is the
That's the day
26th.
before Thanksgiving.
No, we're meeting on the 25th and Thanksgiving's the 26th.
No, we're not. We're meeting on the 18th.
We're meeting on the
18th.
18th is fine.
18th is
I
okay?
don't have that on mine.
No, it's usually the 4th.
I'm looking at the minutes, and the minutes, it says November 18th is at 5 p.m.
Okay, great. Oh, I think we changed that when we did that. I
We
think
did.
you're right, Frank.
We did.
Here we
Yes.
are.
Okay.
I'm not able to make that.
18th.
Nope. I had two conflicts on the 18th.
You don't think Zoom works all the way from Minnesota?
Oh, that's not the issue.
Okay.
What about the 19th?
I already have something that meets on the 18th.
What about the 19th?
Yeah, I could do that.
Except I think I have my Groton Long Point.
Pardon?
I got my Groton Long Point Bridge, I think.
Okay.
On the Thursday, yeah.
Well, we can
Before?
start early and end early.
It starts at.
The 24th, Tuesday?
Tell me what you want to do. I think it's important that we all are present.
Right,
Right.
no, it is.
What if we did the Monday, the 23rd?
I can do that.
Good here.
I can do that.
Hold on a second, let me get my calendar.
And our chair won't be here.
What was the date?
23rd.
23rd Monday,
That works for me.
works for me.
Works here.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Everybody's able. Okay, so what I'll have to do is I'll cancel the regular meeting and establish a special meeting. That's all. I'd have to do it that way. That's all.
Okay.
Okay,
Sounds
so
good.
it's a special meeting
Monday, the
on
23rd.
11/23, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Okay, great. Okay, and put on your calendar, if you all will, for December 8th. Town council. Don't have a time yet, probably 6:30.
Okay.
And it's gonna have, I guess I'm hoping that we're not gonna spend the whole of the next time talking about what we're gonna talk about to the town council.
I would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, I would too.
Well,
Might wanna
they
send-
Have an upfront piece that you want, and then do you want some individual slides from the sections?
I think, yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think.
Particularly the
So if
framework.
we meet on the 23rd, that gives us some time for the other areas we're working in
Yes.
to hone what priority recommendations are. Because I think what Patrice asked Zell and I the other day was, please run by her and John your ideas, and this doesn't need to be a complete report. It's just run by them our ideas for what we would present to the town council on the 8th as potential courses of action. And the idea here is to try to expend as little political capital as we can, but to get a buy-in. Is that an accurate statement, Zell?
I think it is.
When are you planning to do that?
Presenting a proposal for a policy?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, this is where the task force has been going. These are the kinds of things we're thinking about recommending. Can you react to them? And we will have an upfront reaction of Patrice and John. So
Right.
at that 23rd meeting, we should schedule our meeting with them very soon thereafter, like the 29th, 30th or
But I'm
whatever.
asking, are we gonna propose that Groton adopts something, a broader policy statement on climate change, or whether it's climate change or resiliency and sustainability? And maybe it's the definitions we agree to, that they
Okay.
agree to do their work under that context.
It's been proposed before.
My gut sense is that the definitions might be worthwhile, but that the overall scope is not what we should be talking about then. This is the definition. These are
Okay,
initial recommendations that have come out of our work. And before we put them into a fuller report, which none of us want to write, I think Zell, what he talked about just a little while ago was the idea that we take those recommendations and the degree of expertise that we as task force members have in each of those areas and say, we would like to interject these into the existing plans of the town, because the plans are there.
Yeah, okay. Let me just follow up and say that I think what I would like to do is I would like to go back to my report that I produced 10 years ago and just simply update that. And say, we've updated this plan that the earlier task force had done. And I want you guys to all participate in that, but then go on with just what Jesse had said, so that at least we've got something we can hand to them and say, here's the framework upon which we're operating, and it's consistent with what we have done over the last couple of years. One of the things we need to say to them is that there are all these things that are sitting on the shelf and nothing's been done about it. And while there's been a light bulb here and a light bulb there, we're not setting a very good example for the rest of the community. I'll say that nicely, of course.
Your Groton task force said addressing climate change needs to be a central organizing principle for the entire community of Groton.
Amen.
That was in at least 2012 or 13, but it looks like 2009 even.
That's right.
There it is.
Okay. Anything else?
nope,
So just to that end, Zell, so that that can happen, if each of you could try to, highlight the specific actions that we might present to the council as things that the town could do in the very near future with the benefits of doing that, I think that would be really useful.
It doesn't have to be a long list either. It can
No,
be
no,
short.
it can be,
One
it
or
can
two
be
points.
2 items. I mean, we're trying to give them a roadmap.
If everybody had 2 items, that would be that's 10 items. That's too many.
So 1,
Well, you're gonna need a couple examples to pull.
No,
from.
I know.
we do, because then there's some choice involved, but this is what we would recommend. These are the benefits of it. This is, I don't want to get into cost benefit because you didn't ask me to talk about this book. But the cost benefit of all of them available. I mean, Patrice and what they're most concerned about is how the hell do we fund any of these things?
Okay, one other point that before we quit is that Jesse's got a book that she just finished reading, which Frank's already read, I've read, I think Victor read.
Victor may have read.
And if nothing else, I'd be happy to copy the last chapter, which I think is the most important one for you all to read. It is a way of summarizing a whole lot of information in a very readable sort of format, and it's not very long. Jesse, you want to have any comments about that, or Frank?
I'm going to say it's not even the information. It is the it is the prerogative, the necessity of acting. And, you know, it's put into a context of this is a sin against the planet.
Right.
And we are all complicit in that sin. And we don't embrace this that way because we don't see it every day. I mean, I used to say in the nuclear freeze campaign, if a bomb the size of Hiroshima had dropped every day, we would have abolished nuclear weapons not centuries ago, but decades ago. And this is the most cogent, compelling argument I have read in a long time for why we have to act. And so if Zell can send that out, the rest of the book is great. It's a history of why we haven't acted. So it's history that we've all lived through, but the compelling nature of somehow what we want to communicate to our town and to our fellow human beings of why this is a fight for survival, basically.
Mhm.
No question.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Frank?
One quick note. If you noticed in the newspaper this morning, in the editorial page, there was an article on the idiocy of climate change, my terms.
Yes.
I call your attention to it.
Yep.
Which
But
paper?
it made me furious. I saw it, and it made
Yeah.
me furious.
When you
Which
talk
paper is
about, this was in the New London Day editorial page today.
I saw it.
There's an op-ed piece there.
Tell somebody.
Yeah.
He's been doing that for a long time, and he's just a
Yeah.
jerk.
But I mean, you think about removing some of the social media, removing spurious communication. You can't, and then you read that and you wonder what the hell's going on over the editorial page of the New London Day.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, with that bright note, anybody else got anything else?
Thank you.
Bye,
Let's go to
all.
dinner. Let's go to dinner.
I need the motions.
I need
Move to
a-
adjourn.
Who's got
Second.
Move to adjourn.
second?
Second is whom?
Maggie.
Maggie.
Maggie, okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Maggie.
you. Be in touch with everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Stay well, guys. Stay
Good night.
well, guys.
Take care. Stay healthy.
You too. Thanks, guys.